Hey everybody, grace and peace. My name is Paul Dezay. I'm here with you from Sandy Hook United Methodist Church for our weekly intersections. This is the way we read the scriptures together. And then also to give you a preview for this coming Sunday at Sandy Hook United Methodist Church. So let's jump into the scriptures and let's see what themes we find as we study. And so this chart is how we do what we do here at Sandy Hook. This is, we have a journal, and we have the journal. Let me put the cover on here. This is the cover. You can pick these up. Oh my goodness. There we go. I think I'd learn after all this. So there's the journal, and then we have these charts, and here is the chart for this week. You can see my scribbles. But we have these as gifts for everyone who visits and is a part of Sandy Hook United Methodist Church to read the scriptures together to prepare us for Sunday. So these four passages are the four passages for this coming Sunday, which is Pentecost Sunday. And so we read them in advance. We read them to prepare our hearts for worship, to prepare our hearts for the sermon, really for the Holy Spirit to speak to us. And so you can see in the upper left-hand corner is John 14, 8 to 17, and optional is 25 to 27. This is the gospel text for this coming Sunday, Pentecost Sunday. And so when we take a look at this, there's a few things that jumped out. Is the connection between the Father and Jesus. And we like to separate them, of course, but in reality, they are communing together. They are together as one. And what we hear from Jesus, we're hearing from the Father. Jesus shows us who the Father is. Jesus shows us who the Father has always been. That is so important theologically for us because we design in our own ways and culturally, we think of God as this mean, strict, angry man, right? And we think of Jesus as the nice, loving son. But their message is connected. Jesus shows us who the Father is, the character of the Father, shows us the love of the Father. And so you can't really separate their character, who they are and what they do, because they are together, and super important. I know God because I know Jesus. I know who the Father is because I know Jesus. Um, there is a verse in there that says that we will do greater things. And let me read the verse here. Let me find it really quick. There we go. Verse 12, I assure you that whoever believes in me will do the works that I do. They will even do greater works than these because I am going to the Father. And so this verse connects to the book of Acts and Pentecost. When Jesus goes to the Father, he sends his Spirit to live within us as the church, and so that we can carry out the work of Jesus. It's the Acts of the Apostles. It's a continuation of the work of Jesus through the power of the Spirit. And Jesus says we'll even do greater things than he did. And I really think that's what the book of Acts is. It's this continuation of God's love reaching greater and greater amounts of people through his love. And we'll talk about that more in a second. The Holy Spirit is the advocate, the Paraclete. Advocate is the opposite of the accuser. That's what the word Satan means, the accuser. So the Holy Spirit is opposite the accuser, opposite of Satan. Holy Spirit defends us against attacks, gives support to those in the margins. And so we are called to be advocates also, to defend against the attacks, to support the marginalized. An advocate is someone who spends time at the side of someone who's going through a trial. And really, that's at the heart of what social justice is standing up for someone who can't stand for themselves, speaking for someone who can't speak for themselves, defending someone who is being attacked from the accuser. So yeah, that's then there's this verse here at the bottom, 27, and says, "Peace I leave you, my peace I give you. I give to you not as the world gives. Don't be troubled or afraid." Maybe you need that today. Maybe we all need it today. Romans, so the upper right, Romans chapter 8, verses 14 to 17. It's important little history context. Nero, the Caesar, the famous one who persecuted Christians, he was adopted into the family and became heir of Claudius. And so that history would be very important. In that culture, when you were adopted in, you were part of the family. You weren't a second child and a stepchild or secondary in the family environment. You were full privileges, right? And so this idea of being an heir, Caesar being an heir, is a great reminder of that context. The adopted child can become heir. An adopted child can be brought into that kind of relationship. And so what Paul is saying to the church in Rome, to the house churches in Rome, he says, all who are led by the Spirit are God's sons and daughters. You didn't receive a spirit of slavery to lead you back again into fear, but you received a spirit that shows you are adopted as his children. With this spirit we cry, Abba, Father. The same spirit agrees with your spirit that we are God's children, but if we are God's children, we are also heirs. We are God's heirs and fellow heirs with Christ if we suffer with him, if we really suffer with him, so that we really can also be glorified with him. A couple things in there. Spirit of slavery. That's slavery, giving us a picture of the Israelites in Egypt being slaves to Pharaoh. But there's also this idea of slavery to sin, where we are addicted to sin. Sin enchains us. I think we all know what it feels like to be chained spiritually to sin, to addiction. But there's also this spirit of slavery to fear, and I think that's in fear of punishment, fear of hell, and I think that the message of Paul is saying the Spirit sets us free from fear. Great message. But it's also the Spirit that affirms and confirms our adoption as children of God. That's our true identity. We're not slaves to fear. We're not slaves to sin. We are children of God. We are the beloved children of God, and he is well pleased with us. That's our true identity. And the Spirit affirms that in us, reminds us of our true identity as beloved children of God. And then it talks about being an heir and receiving the privileges of that, being inheritance. The Spirit is a reminder of our future. It's a promise of our future in the new heavens and the new earth. The Spirit is a symbol of our inheritance. It's like an engagement ring. It reminds us of what the future is, right? And then also there is the verse in there about suffering with Christ. If we suffer with Christ, we will also be glorified with him. In early church, they suffered quite a bit. They were persecuted quite a bit. Now, we're not persecuted in our world here in America, in Columbus, Indiana. But we need to be reminded that suffering is real, that we are called to suffer with Christ as we go down this path, and many people do around the world. Acts chapter 2, verses 1 to 21, the bottom left, this is our Old Testament passage. I know it's not Old Testament. Eastertide season, we're in the book of Acts, so it's an exception to the rules. Typically, that bottom left-hand corner, our Wednesday passage, is a Old Testament passage. So this is the Pentecost passage. So much in here. There is an Old Testament festival called Festival of Weeks, or Pentecost. It takes place 50 days after Passover. and it is a celebration, a party that the harvest has come in, and it's also a celebration of Moses receiving the law on Mount Sinai. And so the Jewish people gathered in Jerusalem like they did every year to celebrate this particular festival. And while they were there, while they were gathering, this event took place. Now, it's important to know that the disciples, the apostles, 120, are in the upper room, the same room where they received the communion on Jesus's last night. And they're there and they're praying, and this happens, right? This event happens. It sounds like there's a howling wind. They don't know where it's coming from. There seems like fire falling on their foreheads, like tongues of fire. Don't know exactly what that would look like, but seems weird, crazy, right? And then they started to be able to speak languages and understand different languages. So a lot of crazy stuff going on. This attracts the attention of others. They come running to see what the sound is, and they hear the disciples, the apostles, these people speaking different languages and understanding, and they're going, "This is crazy. What's going on?" And they assume that they're drunk, right? Peter says, "Wait, it's not even 9 in the morning. How could we be drunk?" And then um, talks about in here, and I'm not going to read it, but talks about all the different people that were there from all these different languages, and they're able to understand. It's a reversal of the Tower of Babel, where the languages are scattered. Here we're coming together, and everyone's able to understand one another. Um, and the purpose of this is mission, the purpose of being able to understand in other languages so that the message could be communicated. And Peter stands up and preaches a message, and he connects the dots from Joel, a passage from Joel. In the last days, God says, "I'll pour out my spirit," which is a super important passage. Notice it says last days. Last days began back then, so we've been in 2,000 years of last days, um, anticipating the new heavens and the new earth. In the last days, the Spirit, God will pour out His Spirit on all flesh. The listing of the different nations that are in there, the Parthians, the Medes, the Amalekites, all of these different nations that are in there is a reminder that God desires to pour out His Spirit on all flesh. The mission is that this God of the Jews desires for His kingdom to be built not just in Jerusalem, but around the world. Last week in Acts chapter 1, it said the disciples will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on them, and they'll be God's witnesses in Jerusalem, and then it spreads out to the end of the earth. And this is a fulfillment of that. And then the book of Acts is them carrying this message to the ends of the earth as far as they understand what the ends of the earth are. What happens in Peter's sermon is he talks about Jesus being his death, his resurrection, and his ascension, that he is the king. And that gospel message is received, and 3,000 people are baptized and become part of the kingdom. And that's a beautiful story of Pentecost. And instead of the law being given to Moses in tablets, the law is given into our hearts. And we experience the presence of Christ, but we are empowered to be God's witnesses. And it's important that we connect the dots there, that empowerment and what that's all about. Thursday's passage, bottom right, is Psalm 104, and this particular psalm is a psalm of praise. And just briefly, it talks about how God is the creator. He's done great things. Earth is full of his creation. The things in the sea, even Leviathan, plays in the sea. And then it talks about, and this is what I believe is super important, is that when God lets loose his breath, this is verse 30, things are created. Things are created. As God breathes, as God lets loose his breath, things are created. And then to kind of connect the dots there with that idea of breath is that the word in Hebrew and in Greek for spirit is breath or wind. And so as God breathes his spirit, it's the breath of God. And just like Adam in chapter 2 of Genesis, God breathes into his nostrils the breath of life, and Adam becomes a human being. And so there's that imagery here. And that's what happens at Pentecost. God breathes his spirit, and people are animated and brought to life, be able to be the people that God created them to be witnesses, to do what Adam and Eve were called to do in the beginning, to tend the garden, to be image bearers and allow that garden to spread to fill the earth, the glory of the Lord to spread to fill the earth. All right, so I've babbled long enough. What are the intersections? What intersections did you find? That's that center box. What did you find this week? I wrote down a few. What you come up with will be much different than what I come up with. There's not like right answers here. So it's really important to share one another. I think all small groups and house churches and Sunday school classes should spend a minute or two at the beginning of all their classes just talking about what intersections they found in their scriptures. That encourages people to read the Bible. And, we have a real biblical illiteracy issue in the church today. That this method allows people to connect the dots in a really great way. The three that I came up with is the Holy Spirit being the breath of God. As I said in Psalm, it really is a reminder as Jesus talks about the Holy Spirit being the comforter, the companion, the advocate. God animates the disciples with the empowerment of the Holy Spirit. In the Psalm, there is this God brings things to life by his breath, by the Spirit. The Spirit affirms our identity as the beloved child of God, breaks the chains, liberates us from slavery of fear. That second idea that I wrote down is just the empowerment to be witnesses, to be the people we're created to be the children of God. Children show their father in the way that they live. They reflect the image of the Father. And so that idea of being empowered to witness is really what the whole book of Acts is about. It's the building of God's kingdom and its spreading. And then finally, the third theme is this idea we're no longer slaves to fear. Do not be afraid. We are children of God. I love how Jesus says that in verse 27 of John 14. Do not be afraid. He gives us peace, not as the world gives, but he gives us that shalom, what we crave, his presence, the Holy Spirit, the fire, the warmth, the comfort that only he could give. And we are beloved, right? So we're liberated from the slavery to fear. What did you come up with? Would you share that with me, please? All right, let's talk about Sunday. Sunday is Pentecost Sunday, June the 5th, 2022. Wear red. Wear red. And create that tradition. I know that you probably have done that in the past, and let's kind of bring it back. Just wear red on Pentecost. It'll be fun. It's also Grad Sunday, so we'll be celebrating. We have 4 graduates. We'll be celebrating our graduates on Sunday. The sermon, Pentecost sermon, is the conclusion of the Altogether Different sermon series as we take a look at the Pentecost story. And we connect the dots with everything that we talked about in the weeks before from the book of Acts. And we're going to kind of summarize it in this idea of what the Holy Spirit has been up to in the book of Acts, and Pentecost is kind of the beginning of that. But also, we're going to talk about what that means for us, right, as the modern day witnesses of Jesus, right? So, and then next week, the week after, is Trinity Sunday, and then the week after that, which is Father's Day, we start a new series called Just Jesus, simply Jesus, just Jesus. So excited about that. That's all I got. I hope you have a great weekend, everybody. Yard sale on Saturday here at Sandy Hook, and Pentecost Sunday. Wear red.